The Phileas Club is supported by you, its listeners. You can go to patreon.com/the Phileas Club to support it, and it only exists because you do. So please consider it if you enjoy the show. This is the Phileas Club episode 113, and we're going to be talking about fatherhood and what it's like in many different ways. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Phileas Club. This is a show where we cover the news from the past month or so from the perspective of, well, different people in the world. It is a truly global show. We get people from different parts of the world. We get people from different cultures with different opinions, all of that. But that is the regular show. Today, we're doing a special, and we're doing a special about fatherhood. We have gathered a few fathers here who have experienced their fatherhood in different parts of the world. Myself, I'm Patrick Beja, and I have the experience of that from France and Finland. I think pretty direct experience, and there are some interesting things to see here. And we also have two guests. The first one is Bruce, who has been on the show before. Bruce is from Scotland/Zimbabwe, but mostly Scotland nowadays. How's it going, Bruce?
That's good. Thanks, Patrick. It's good to be here.
You have two kids. You have inexplicably decided to have another one after the first one, which
yes.
I don't really understand how that happens, but
we
I
actually
hope he will
planned
tell us about that.
yeah.
Yes.
You cut off there at the end.
Oh, sorry. I will go through
Excellent.
why we decided to have two.
Yes, the crazy moment when it happened. And also, as you heard, Martin is here as well. He's been on the show before also, and he is in Japan, although he is French. But your daughter was born in Japan. How's it going, Martin?
Oh, it's going perfectly. So hello, guys. Happy to be there. It's always an honor, like last time.
Thanks for being on. So you have one kid. You're a much more reasonable person. You have one daughter.
If I count well, yes. So far, just one.
And myself, so I have a son, one child. Probably enough, although things have been a little bit less. I've been less certain about all of this than I had been in the initial 3 months. But so, what we're going to do is that we're going to go over the different stages, and I guess initially we're going to start with the pregnancy, and then we're going to be talking about delivery and the first few days, the first few months, and we're going to artificially limit ourselves to the first. Let's say 8 months, because that's how old my son is, and it will be more than enough anyway. But I don't want any spoilers, is what I said jokingly earlier before we started recording the show. But I think that's already a lot to cover. And what I want to do is try to get you a feeling of how we felt as fathers, like as parents, of course, but as fathers. And I think a lot of people might relate to this in the audience. And if you're not a father, or if you're a mother, maybe it will be interesting for you as well to get into the mind of the fathers to be and fathers that we are now. So we're going to try and do that in this episode. So let's get started with the pregnancy itself. And I think Martin, before we started recording, was saying, are we going to cover the moment we found out? And I think absolutely we are going to be talking about this, because it's one of the key moments, obviously. Well, you were talking about it, Martin, so let's go to you first. How did you find out, and how did you react when the news came?
Sure, it was a crazy moment. Actually, I was not with my wife. I was by myself, and I was having dinner because I had a very late work. So I was so hungry. So I stopped by a tonkatsu restaurant. Tonkatsu is a pork cutlet, really delicious. So I was eating by myself, and I received a phone call from my wife, who, yes, obviously discovered it on the first place. And I was really speechless, and some tears started to roll on my cheeks.
Oh, really?
And I really noticed some people looking at me. What happened to this tall guy?
The tonkatsu was really delicious. That's
yes,
the first time
it was so good that I had to cry.
Oh,
so
that's
cute. How I learned about it. Yes,
and there were tears.
Crazy moment.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yes, there was tears, real tears, not crocodile tears.
But you were, I mean, obviously, I'm guessing you were trying, or you knew it was a possibility, but it still came as a emotional shock.
Exactly, it was really random. I was not sure. I was not even sure it could happen one day. So yes, we were actually in a period where we were trying, because we were thinking about that for a while. So, but I didn't, well, of course, like everybody, I didn't expect to come that fast. Actually, I thought I could wait for a few more years, but yeah, that was a crazy moment. So usually I eat very slowly, so I think it was the fastest meal I have ever had, and I came back to our place to celebrate.
So wait a second. You still finished the meal. You're like, wait, my life is changing. Everything is going to be different from now on. But I have to finish
no
that
waste.
delicious tonkatsu.
No waste. It was so good.
Yeah, that's I think an efficient way of doing things. Actually, I'm going to go next because I wasn't that emotional. We had been trying, not for very long, but we had been trying, and we had a couple of false starts. Nothing dramatic, but it was like, oh, maybe you are pregnant, and maybe, but then we do the test, and it seems like you're not, and so we kind of had a little bit of staggered emotional shock, and so when it turned out that she actually was, she did the test in the morning and came to wake me up, it was like, hey. I think I might be pregnant for real this time. And I was like, oh, all right.
By the way, I'm pregnant.
Yeah, exactly. It was that. But we sort of cautiously, we didn't want to get too excited, and we wanted to wait until we had like the medical examination to be sure. So it kind of was an exciting 10 minutes where it was like, oh, wow, okay, cool. And then it was like, oh, but let's not get too excited. So we went and had breakfast, and the day kept going as if nothing had happened. And I think that's where things are a little bit different for me than they were for my wife. And maybe one day we'll do the mother's side of the story, which will be interesting as well. But now I really want to get our take on it. For me, it was like, oh, cool. But, 9 months away, probably a few changes are going to happen in her, but it doesn't concern me as directly. And we're going to talk about the pregnancy, and there were some things. But for me, it was like, yeah, cool, awesome. We'll talk about it when we have the confirmation, and then it's going to be in 9 months. So cool, but we'll see what happens. So there were no tears, no big emotion, nothing like that. It was really very muted. So that was probably quite
because
different.
Maybe you didn't realize properly what was happening.
There was a little bit of that. There was a little bit of that, but there was also the fact that I'm always super cautious, and I don't want to get excited before something has actually happened. So she was actually pregnant, but we didn't have the confirmation from the doctor. So I didn't want to get excited to be disappointed afterwards. And that's always something that is maybe my personality trait. But I think for my wife, she couldn't ignore it. Like, it's not like I ignored it, but I didn't get involved in it. Not get involved, that's the wrong word, but get invested. That's the word I was looking for. I didn't get invested initially by excessive caution. And for her, obviously, your body starts changing immediately, even if you don't feel it in the shape of your body. Immediately you start feeling, or very quickly you start feeling things, and the mere knowledge that you have this thing growing inside you, I think makes it impossible to ignore. Whereas for me, I was very happy to go and play some video games a couple of hours afterwards. Bruce, I'm curious how it went for you.
For me, it was very much the same as you, Patrick. Very similar. We'd been trying for about 6 months, and while we hadn't had false starts, it was a moment of joy. It was, yes, we've done this. I think we didn't realize the impending changes to our lives, especially with our first boy. But even with our second boy, well, the first boy, I was there. She went into the toilet and came out and said, I think I am pregnant, and did the test, and yeah, sure, it was positive, and that was a moment of yay, we're going to have a baby, and
I was like, so how certain is this thing? And we Googled it, and we're like, yeah, it's pretty much 99%. So yeah, you probably are pregnant. So that was okay.
It was very similar to that, and I think for me, with the second boy, Caden, it was actually a telephone call, and that hit me a lot more because I knew what was coming. I thought,
so it wasn't the emotion; it was the dread.
No. Yeah, I knew what the impending, and I'm. Before I go into any of this, it has to be prefaced by I love my boys more than anything in the world, and I think you two will say exactly the same thing. Anything I say
confirm.
Now, I love my kids, and I will do more than everything for them, and I will go to jail for them, and do any number of illegal and legal things to make sure they're happy, and grow up to be good people. But
however,
I didn't realize that back then when what we were getting into, and we will get into that. So for me, it was like, oh wow, yes, I'm going to be a dad, and I can teach them how to do this. And we didn't know if it was going to be a boy or a girl at that time, and so that was not that it mattered, but it was
so you weren't sure whether to prepare the princess dresses or the knight's armors. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, exactly.
No, well, we eventually we decided it wouldn't matter. We were going to go with a yellow color scheme or something like that, just so that people. Gender is another issue altogether, but I think my initial reaction was very muted, much like yours, Patrick. I was very much okay. It only ever really hit me when we went for our first scan, and in Zimbabwe.
Oh, yes, that's really emotional, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to go into that, but that was when the tears came for me. We were in the doctor's office, and she lay back.
Tears came again for me.
I get a feeling that Martin is going to be crying like throughout this episode. It's like, oh yeah, and then I started crying. Oh okay. Oh, and then I started crying. Oh okay.
Wait a second. I'm getting my tissues.
Yeah. But just seeing that little fuzzy dot on the screen, and suddenly it was like, oh my God, it's a real thing that I've created. That was when it really hit me.
I have to say, for me, that not muted, that's not the right word, but that being conscious of it without being too impacted continued throughout almost all of the pregnancy. My wife is very strong, and she didn't have any, none of the moods. Well, she had mood swings a little bit, but she didn't let it affect her too much. And she felt obviously heavier, and her body ached and all of that. But she was still 8 months into the pregnancy. She was going to, grocery shopping and carrying bottles of milk and super heavy stuff and coming back not very far, but she was doing it. And I was like, oh my God, are you sure you're? And she was, yes, of course. Why would I? be affected by that. It was so. It's not that it didn't change. I guess the one thing that really affected me was that she would go to bed early, at like 10, sometimes even 9. So I would just kiss her goodnight and go in the den, play some more video games, and that's what the pregnancy was like.
Games.
Yeah.
Oh.
That was what the pregnancy was like for me. And like the first scan was impressive because there was the, like, initially obviously it's just a dot, like literally a pixel on screen that is blinking black and white, like blinking white, and the doctor tells you, hey, look at this, it's your baby, and this is the heart. and you're like, oh, well, okay. It's a little bit, you realize
it's not
it's
my
true,
baby, it's a bean.
it's like even
Yeah,
less than a
exactly.
bean. And so, and in Finland, I wonder how it is for you guys, but in Finland, you are so well taken care of. At least throughout the pregnancy, you have multiple doctor's appointments, and everyone is super nice, and they follow the whole thing with a lot of care, and they ask you all the questions. And like, I get the feeling that the Neuvala, which is the system, the healthcare system that is designed to care for pregnancies and babies and children, is really, they want to make sure, basically it was created maybe a century ago, to make sure that infant deaths were as reduced as possible. So they make sure that you have a good environment, that you have help, that you have, and so they just make sure everything's okay, and you feel almost, I don't want to say on autopilot, because we definitely read a lot of books and we prepared ourselves and we discussed it and all of that, but you feel, I think, safe in a way that I'm not sure you feel in most other countries, because you know that if anything wrong is gonna happen, you are taken care of, and you can call someone, and at any point you can call them and they will have advice for you, and you can ask any question. Like, it feels like you're in a very, I want to say, modern country, like modern society. Anytime I go to Japan, I feel like I don't need to do anything, because you have a store at every corner that has everything, and you don't need to worry about any of it.
Indeed.
Right? And in this case, the pregnancy felt like that. We didn't have to really seriously worry about anything, because we knew we were taken care of by a competent system. It's not like luxury hotel type hospitals, but it's very competent, and it's very all-inclusive, kind of. So that was very liberating for me during the pregnancy, and I could focus on preparing and, as I was saying, reading the books, buying the things, and all of that. Martin, I'm curious, is it as easy, the pregnancy in Japan? I know you spent part of it in France, but...
Yeah, I was quite worried about the medical system, because I had myself some experience, and I heard a lot from friends, both Japanese, English, and French. Many of them have bad experiences at hospital. Really, they are
in Japan, or
they are in Japan. Yes, exactly. In Japan, that's what is weird, because it's the system is made like not anyone can become a doctor, obviously, but there are many doctors, established doctors, who can get, by just their influence, by their power, a license for their kids to become a doctor. Yes, that's
seriously
crazy. That's crazy as it sounds, and I've met some really incompetent doctors, and
I mean, they still have to go to school, but I guess what you mean is they don't have to be very good in school in order to get the license.
Yeah, exactly. They can graduate like this, like in a blink of an eye. It's almost fake, and I've seen the results, and there are some really like freelancers, doctors that don't really understand what happens to you, and they give you some bad medicines, and
That's really scary.
People are really pissed off about that. So I was a bit worried, because giving birth is not something that you take it lightly. But I was really surprised, because our local hospital was really nice and full of really nice people, especially the doctor, the gynecologists.
OBGYN, but
gynecologist.
Yeah, gynecologist.
OBGYN. So really, it was the typical Japanese Oji-san in the 50s, 60s, very grumpy, but very nice at the same time. So that was I really enjoyed going to visit him with my wife for the scan. How do you call the radio?
Ultrasounds. The ultrasounds.
Ultrasounds, yes, to visualize the bean.
Yeah. And
So,
did you? How did the pregnancy as a whole go for you? Were you affected? Like, did your wife, like, I don't know, make you do things, or I don't know, how did it go for you as a dad?
I was I tried to be as supportive as I could. So, but like your wife, I think my wife is very strong, and not that she wants to show that she is strong, that she just is naturally strong.
Yeah.
And she didn't ask for help, so I did some help by myself, of course, going to buy something and carry some heavy luggages. Something interesting is that when you take the train, when you are in the train, there are some reserved seats for pregnant women and elderly people. Yeah. And there's many young Japanese that pretend they don't notice that they have a pregnant woman in front of them. And really, that pissed me off. So I had one time to tell a guy, okay, now can you leave the seat, please?
Of course, you being a foreigner, a gaijin, you took the outrageous line of speaking up. How did they react?
Oh, he was saying, okay, sorry, I didn't notice, and he went away.
Sumimasen, gomenasai.
Yes, sumimasen, exactly like that.
Okay.
So no, it was a good period.
I think for me,
there's something very attractive about French people speaking Japanese. I think it's...
I miss it. You know, some listeners might not know, but I lived in Japan for a few years, and I speaking different languages, when you stop speaking one of them, is you do miss it. So when I interact with Martin, I take the opportunity to say a few words.
And the last podcast I was on was about Japan, of course.
The what? Oh yeah, the last episode the last we did together.
You invited me. Yes, last episode.
Of course. There's, I think, a couple of moments that stand out during the pregnancy for me. The first one is when we actually got to see in the ultrasound, we got to see a head, or I can't remember if it was an ultrasound or a different kind of imaging exam thing, but we got to see an actual head, and way more than the bean or the heartbeat, or that was when it was like, oh, so it's not, I don't want to make it seem like it's the traditional kind of dumbstruck father that is like, oh my God, it's real, because I very much knew it was real. But it took a form, I guess the form of a baby, which was more, which made it more tactile in my head, kind of. So that was a moment where I was like, it was maybe 6 months in, when my wife and I looked at each other, and she was basically the same as me. She was, I'm making it sound like, Patrick is the out of touch father because he doesn't have the baby inside him. But she definitely had more of the pregnancy in her, obviously. But But
Obviously, obviously,
but
yeah.
it didn't feel very, as you know, I don't think she was that far from my approach to it. And that moment when we saw the head was the first time when we like that, we had that traditional movie moment of like we take each other's hands and we look at each other and we're like, oh, it's a baby, it's our baby, and that was an emotional time. And the other time was when we were trying to I was trying to listen to the baby in my wife's belly, and at some point he was kicking all the time, but at some point he kicked my actual head, like when I was trying to listen, and that was really like, oh wow, he kicked me. There's a physicality to this little alien thing growing in my wife's belly. And that was a really fun moment, which I still remember now, and we both laughed about. But that made it more palatable, not palatable, but more real. Bruce, what about you? How did the pregnancy go?
Pregnancy, I'll go through two of them, because the
first two pregnancies.
The two pregnancies were very different. Were very, very different. The first one was mostly in Zimbabwe. We only moved out. We only flew literally a day before the last day my wife was able to fly. Right. They wouldn't have let her fly after that. So, she was bursting at the seams. It was literally, I think, 40 weeks out of the 46 or something, or 36 out of the 40. It was very much, we moved in September and the baby was born in November. So maybe it wasn't that close. But the airlines have restrictions on how late a pregnant woman is allowed to fly, at least long distance.
It's 3 months unless you have a note from your doctor, in which case I think you can go up to 2 months, but that's it.
Yeah, that was it. We got the note, so it was 2 months before. He was born on the 24th of November, and we flew on the 17th of September. So that was September, October. Yeah, so that would have been 2 months, and that was an experience in itself. But in Zimbabwe, the first 7 months of the pregnancy were, I think it was a very different experience from in Scotland for me, because, as you said, here in Scotland, they very much, funnily enough, are trying to follow the Finnish model. They just brought in, you get the baby boxes, don't you, in Finland?
Yeah.
And that while they weren't implemented back then, they have been implemented recently. And
just let me explain what they are for those who don't know. The baby boxes are a set of clothes, tools, and literally a wooden box that you can use with a mattress to make the baby sleep in. Which is nowadays it's very cute. It's known by many people in the world. But initially, it was part of that effort to reduce infant mortality of the Neovala, the part of the healthcare system, as I said, that cares for infants and pregnancies and babies and children. And it's really, the intent is to make sure that every parent has the bare essentials they need to clothe and the baby and make sure they sleep in a safe environment and not in the middle of the bed, where obviously it can be dangerous, and all of those. And that is it's cute nowadays, but it's a very intentional healthcare tool that they started distributing for quote unquote free to every new parent. So yeah, they're implementing that in Scotland as well.
In Scotland, yeah, the idea behind it is to reduce inequalities. So everyone gets it. Doesn't matter how much money you've got and what your means are, etc. So I think it's a good thing in a way, because I think there's a lot of even to this day inequalities and teenage pregnancies where mothers don't have anything and are forced to bring up a baby not without really having the needs anyway. So that's what we had in Scotland, and
so it wasn't like that in Zimbabwe, I guess.
Well, you see, in Scotland we had very much a midwife was assigned to us very early on. We had a district nurse who was assigned to us very early on, and they visited regularly. And my wife went to had appointments set up. There was a whole schedule of appointments where she would have to go and speak to a doctor, have a scan, etc., etc. And it was very much your experience of being taken care of. Whereas in Zimbabwe, we had to be a lot more proactive ourselves. We'd go to the doctor, and he did a scan for us right there in his room. He just happened to have a
ultrasound
one of those
machine,
ultrasounds, yeah, and he did that for us, and then we had to pay extra to go to a professional. What are they called? People who do actual full ultrasounds. There's a radiologist, I think is the name.
Okay.
And so we do that just to get the sex scan, gender scan, and we then had to do a lot of looking up. What is he now? How big is he? What are his needs? My wife had to then make sure she was taking the right vitamins, because there's special vitamins that.
And they didn't tell you at the doctor's office? Or?
Well, he would suggest it, but there was no sort of this is what you must do. It wasn't. There wasn't. It was very much in the. I don't want to say the first world, but in Scotland, very much a structure. Whereas in Zimbabwe, it's very much, well, you're in this. This is what's going to happen. This is what you must plan for, but you must sort it out yourself. And you've got to pay for everything yourself, obviously. That was another issue, but I think we've gone into that before. So for us. Eventually, that and other things, we decided to move, and we had to fly to Scotland, and it was interesting. The moment we landed here in Scotland, suddenly we were into the system, and it was such a major change. We were just taken care of. And my wife had a midwife who was assigned to us, and they were asking all sorts of questions about what's your previous midwife had to say about this and that, and we had to say, well, we've had nothing, as far as that goes. So I think for me, as far as the medical side, yeah, there was that, and my wife was very much on the flight, vulnerable, and that wasn't really. I don't know if you talked about traveling with a baby, but traveling with a heavily pregnant wife was a very, very different experience. I had to very much be and she's not like this normally, but I had to very much be the man, telling people, hold on,
Right.
Guardian angel.
And because we were going through, and they would say, well, you can't take a bottle of water through there, and she burst into tears. It was like, well, she's heavily pregnant. It's a bottle of bloody water. We'll drink it in front of you. It's very hot. We were in Nairobi at the time, and it was very much putting down foot and doing all those
manly things.
Manly things.
Yeah. That's okay.
Is fine. So I think for me, the Scottish angle was very, very interesting. It was so eye-opening for me when our second baby was, on the wall. And emotionally was very different. We were able to think about completely different things. So. Yeah.
I think that's the common thing that everyone says. The second one is completely different. But before we move on, we're going to talk about the delivery. But before we move on, I want to ask Martin about part of your pregnancy, or your wife's pregnancy, was in France, right? How was that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's a good reason for that. We were in Japan, so of course we were planning to get the delivery in Japan, but something happened on March 2011. There was some kind of little earthquake in Fukushima that was so little that it the tsunami that followed destroyed everything. And I still remember being in my apartment. I was on the 5th floor. So Tokyo, if you don't know, is about 230 kilometers from Fukushima. But I felt an incredible rumble, and the noise, and everything was falling apart. And I was...
Oh, you're cutting off here.
And that was really,
you cut off
really crazy.
You cut off for a couple of seconds, but yeah, keep going.
Okay, so yes, I said I was terrified by the rumble and everything was falling apart. So that was really terrible. So I had to go out, and of course, because of the earthquake, every train, every subway, even in Tokyo, stopped. So that's why my wife had to go back to our house by foot. So
From
it
where?
took
From
her
work?
from her work, yeah, from her office, and it took her 5 hours.
Jesus.
And
Could
she
you
was
did you manage to
she
call
was
her? I guess the phone was
yes, we
working.
could call.
Okay.
It worked better with Line. It's the messaging
Right.
application that is very popular in Japan. So the 4G networks were down, so we had to use the Wi-Fi that still worked. And yeah, I could contact her. Everything was fine. I was, phew. So
Did you not go to meet her, like with a bike or something? Or no, maybe you were eating tonkatsu, so you had to finish it before you could go.
Sure. In life there are some priorities.
Right. So Fukushima,
No, really. Seriously,
the
yes.
earthquake and the nuclear plant and all of that, you decided,
And then
yeah.
after the tsunami, yes, we decided, because it was really the total blackout, so we didn't know what was happening. It was pretty terrible. So we had the opportunity to take a plane first to Kyoto and then to France, and it was it was April. So the delivery date was getting close. So we were really struggling to choose whether to give birth in France or in Japan. So, like Bruce, it was so close to the day we couldn't take the plane with the big belly, and we finally chose to go back to Japan, because that's where our life is. So that's where we live.
But you spent, I want to know about it was a few months you spent in France while she was pregnant.
It was actually not a few months, but more than about a month and a half. Yeah.
Did you go to the hospital at that point during that time, or did you?
Yes. We made a few visits.
Yeah.
And,
how was it?
The good thing about the healthcare is that, as we had a special status of refugees. That was weird.
Okay.
So everything was taken care of. So we didn't have to pay anything for the visit, for the scan thing, and the visit to the hospital. And the funny thing is that really the doctor in France are different from the doctors in Japan.
Well, that's what I want to know. How are they different?
Yeah. Pretty brutal.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Pretty brutal. Okay, lay down. Okay. Spread the legs like this.
Really?
Yes. So, but it was not that terrible. Of course, it was okay. It was a nice doctor, a woman doctor, and she was nice, but pretty brutal compared to Japanese doctors.
I wonder if your wife would say the same thing. It was okay. She was nice. But
I was beside her, so I could say, but no, I think it was pretty okay.
Okay, but did you also feel like that sense of being taken care of and safe, as we mentioned?
Not exactly. Really, we had to wait a lot. It was a very bigger hospital than the one we used to go in Japan. Our hospital in Japan is a really local one. It's like you go to there's just one doctor actually, and a few nurses, and a few people, a few staff to get the papers done. So we had to go in Toulouse, my hometown in south of France, and it was the big hospital. We had to wait hours, even if she was pretty pregnant, as you know. So it was more like industrial,
right.
Birth factories.
That's funny,
it's very local.
In Helsinki, which is not a small town, they've they've closed down some hospital to have like not in all inclusive, like hospitals that can do every type of operation. Usually, at least in France, you have like level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 1s are smaller maternities, but they can't do like a C-section or something like that. And so in order to make sure you have, well, to reduce costs, of course, but also to make sure you have all of the necessary equipment and staff and expertise, in Helsinki, they've made all of the hospitals into like 2 or 3 centers, and and still, even though it's quite large, it's not too bad. You don't wait too long, and Helsinki is not a small town. So anyway, that's an interesting aspect. But let's move on to the actual delivery.
Sorry, before that, I just wanted to ask a question to Bruce, because you said you really moved from Zimbabwe to Scotland, but of course, with a 10 months pregnant wife, it's a thing, but it's also a thing to move for good. So how was the accommodation? Where did you get somewhere to live pretty fast, and all the other things? And
that is very, very relevant. Yeah, when we made a decision to move, my wife's mother offered. She lived at the time in a 3-bedroom house by herself. So she offered us to stay with her until we got, set up and got our feet under the table, etc. So that's what the initial plan was, and that's what we did. That changed within 6 months, but yeah, that we did do that, and I had to do the old going out, getting a job once we landed in Scotland. I actually had a job interview 2 days after I landed, because I'd sent out my CV, etc. I didn't get that job in the end, but yeah, we did a lot of planning into all of that. We had to move our cats too, which we had in Zimbabwe, and they actually cost more to move country than we did. So
babies and cats.
Yeah. Well, but back then I love our cats, but we thought, we've got 2 cats, we know how to take care of a baby, but we're going to how different that is. How people say, I've got a little dog, he's my little baby. No, he's not. But anyway, so yeah, we had a mother-in-law who we stayed with, who was who very generously let us.
It's nice, yeah.
And I don't know that we made it clear, but you moved from Zimbabwe because of the healthcare for the baby and the cost and all of that. It was the reason.
Yeah, it was that, and it was also just not being able to find a job at the time in the climate, and we felt the political situation wasn't going well. But yeah, that's a different story.
All right. Well, let's talk about the delivery. And again, as the dad, how it went for each of us. I'm gonna start just because mine might be the longest, but I'm gonna try to keep it short. Basically, my wife's delivery was kind of a heroic thing. It was a 48 hours affair between the time the delivery the labor started and when our baby was actually born. And the Finnish system does something really clever, which is they encourage you to stay at home until the last possible moment, or rather what you feel is the last possible moment, because we have this image of the how babies are born from movies, which is like, oh my God, the water broke and contractions, we have to go now quickly, and like the taxi and the panic and that is so not how it goes. I mean, in most cases, I'm sure some women deliver in a couple of hours, but actually when you start feeling the contractions, you have a lot of time until things actually start happening. So in the Finnish system, you give them a call and they tell you, have you tried taking some painkillers, and have you tried taking a shower, and stay a little bit more, call back in a couple of hours. And
they really want you to give birth at home.
Well, so they tell you when you have to, like, I can't remember exactly, but it's like when contractions are whatever 10 minutes apart and last at least 30 seconds or something, or maybe really can't remember, maybe that's too late, but they give you a pretty clear time of when it's appropriate to jump in the taxi, and that's what we did. And still, I mean, obviously my wife's delivery was really long, but still we had 24 more hours in the hospital. So that was, the image that you have to jump in the taxi as soon as something happens is, I think everyone will agree, absolutely inaccurate.
Very.
Yeah. But so we went through this, and again, my wife, being the fantastic woman she is, she didn't wake me up when he started having contractions. She's like, when I woke up, she was a little bit, she was like, hey, so contractions started, it's fine, keep sleeping, everything's okay. And obviously that lasted 24 hours. So she even told me, like, just have a good night's sleep. After, a few hours, many hours, maybe 10, 12, I can't remember. Have a good night's sleep. We'll see what happens in the morning. If things get bad, I'll wake you up. We can go. She was like super chill about it. Not super chill. That's mischaracterization. But it was really long. And when we got to the hospital, I was a little bit, not in panic mode, but like, I don't know, Papa Bear, making sure everything's okay. And I'll cut to the important part. It took still after that 24 hours. And at some point, I even went out and went to, have some burgers because I was super hungry. She couldn't eat, but I still had to eat. And when I came back, she finally took the epidural. And long story short, in the end, she was trying to push. The baby wasn't coming out. They tried a bunch of things. And they decided to do a, not emergency, but emergency C-section. And her having complete faith in the system, once they finally decided that they were going to do a C-section, she was like, fine, give me the good drugs and everything. She had faith that everything was going to be taken care of. Like, that was the point when they decided. That was the point when she felt relieved. For me, when that happened, it was 2 minutes. They wrapped everything, took her out of the room, and then I was left alone in that room, and my naturally neurotic frame of mind took over, and I broke down. I was like, I was afraid she was gonna. I was afraid she was not going to be okay. I was afraid the baby wasn't going to be okay. And it took maybe 5-10 minutes until they took me in the room, which were probably the longest 5 or 10 minutes of my life. But I was so afraid. And even in the end, they took me in the room. There was a super nice anesthesiologist who was trying to make jokes, which we weren't responding to, of course. But then the baby was born. I saw it first, and then they put him on my wife for a little bit, and then they took her away and took me in the room with the baby to do some skin to skin and all of that. And it was a bit weird because I was so concerned about my wife that I almost didn't care about the baby. That's terrible to say, but it was like I was in a state of, hadn't slept for 24 hours and worried for so long. And at some point she was trying to push so hard. She was in pain, and it was weird to finally be in that room with the little baby, which I cared about, but I wanted to know where my wife was. And so that was not a fun experience. And I don't think I quite realized that we had a baby until maybe a few days later. But yeah, so I guess the overall story is the healthcare system worked perfectly. And even though there is some unavoidable discomfort for the wife, for the wife or the person delivering, that's how babies work. The everything was taken care of, But for me, it was not a pleasant experience. And for my wife, obviously, neither. But yeah, so that's how it went for the delivery for me. And then finally, I got to the maternity and I was waiting for my wife to arrive. I mean, I actually went to see her because the staff realized, okay, that dude is not gonna let up. He wants to see his wife. So they brought me and the baby to our wife. And so we didn't have that moment. I guess we did. Like, you see the baby and you're like, oh my God, it's the baby. We did, but that's not what I remember. I remember the terror of being of not knowing how my wife was, even though she was perfectly fine, and I deep down I knew she was fine. But so then in the maternity, that was a whole different story because she couldn't sleep. The baby, and we'll get to that when we talk about the first few months, but the baby was not happy to be born. He was super cozy in there, and he was not very happy to be out, and he has a voice on him. Let me tell you, he makes himself heard. So he couldn't sleep. We didn't have a single room because the hospital was super full. And there was another baby in the room who was also not super happy. My wife couldn't sleep. I would go home. Like, the biggest advice I can give, initially we were bummed we didn't have a family room, but it was a blessing because I had to go home, sleep, so that I could take care of the baby in the day so that my wife could sleep. Because otherwise she would, and even then she didn't sleep a lot. So I would say the overall delivery experience was pretty crappy for both of us, but we're a special case, I guess.
You mean she stayed at the maternity and you took the baby home?
No.
Home?
No, of course the baby stayed with her for the night. Okay. And I
okay,
slept.
So you could go
night.
To have a sleep. Okay.
Yeah. And we stayed at the maternity because she had a mild infection, so we had to stay a few more days. Overall, she stayed 4 days, I think, something like that. So yeah, that was the delivery. How was it for you, Martin?
Oh, that was quite easy. Sorry to say that.
It's fine. I'm just happy really, it wasn't as hard for you.
I was expecting the worst, but actually it went pretty well. And the contraction came. We took a cab, went to the hospital, not the one I was talking about, but of course a bigger one. So. And
you were in Kyoto, right?
No. We went back to Tokyo after France. Okay. In Tokyo where we live. So we went to the hospital. Everything went well. My wife was happy with the lunch and the dinner, and she even asked for more onigiri. You know, the rice
balls.
Bowl.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a funny detail because usually. The common thing is that the pregnant woman suddenly wants to eat strawberries.
Right.
It's like some kind of urban legend. I don't know, but my wife, as a Japanese woman, didn't want any strawberries. She wanted onigiri.
Oh, I can understand that. Onigiri is way better than
onigiri, please. So that was one of my duties during the pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
So back to the hospital. So it didn't last long, really. I think I could even go back home to have a rest and then go back to the hospital because the delivery, the labor was planned for about 12 hours. So I could go back doing some work and then went back to the hospital. And
really, you didn't stay at the hospital for the 12 hours?
Yeah. I could even go back home.
Yes. But you could have stayed. That's like, oh, sorry, I have tonkatsu to eat. Like, I'll be back.
No. Yeah, my tonkatsu was waiting for me. So tonkatsu can't wait.
I understand.
No, seriously. I don't know, but it was not for long. But so, of course, I was there a few hours before the expected labor time. So it went pretty well. So like you, she went first on the delivery room. So I was beside. So and you didn't mention, but did you watch in front of? Were you just
Oh no,
beside her.
I was besides her, holding her hand and
Okay.
things like that.
Okay,
And yeah,
me too. Uh,
yeah,
I thought it's a bit shocking, so I thought it was pretty. It was really better to be there.
yeah. I mean, more power to you if you think that if you
Mm,
want to do the watching from the front.
mm,
But that was not for me. I was fine watching. Just holding
mm.
her hand and
Yeah,
yeah,
and some fathers would even
film.
film
Yeah,
the
yeah.
delivery.
No,
That's
no,
the
no.
Actually.
some things are better left, mysterious and yeah. But
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And then she came, and everything changed.
So
Really,
the
I
moment she
realized that.
arrived,
Mm, yeah, that was crazy. Really, some like mind blowing. I was expecting a baby to come out, of course, but it was my baby. So of course, sorry, I cried again.
oh, that's sweet.
Oh, that is so yes, and the nurse let me hold her for a while, and then with the mother we took a few pictures, and that was it. That was really faster than expected on my
Nice.
side.
Oh, good for
Mm.
you. Good for you.
We
Thinking,
had
trying to go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. No, just a bit. We were worried a bit for 2 or 3 days because she had, I don't know how to say it in English, jaundice. When it happens to many kids,
Mm,
many babies when they are born, and they have some yellowish skin,
Yeah,
yeah.
and so it
Jaundice.
has they
It's
have
called
to be
jaundice.
jaundice.
Yeah,
jaundice. So and it has to be treated with ultraviolet rays
Mm,
for a while. But for it was like maybe not that 2 days, but 24 hours, we couldn't be with her because she was
oh,
taking care in a very clinical room, and we could
right,
just
right.
watch her by the window, and it was a bit
Mm,
heartbreaking. So, but of course, it's not that bad, and it gets better just after 20 hours. So it was
okay.
okay.
How about you, Bruce? Was it
Happy end.
easy
well,
or hard?
I've had the two different experiences, two very different experiences. The first one, first child, was very much like yours, Patrick. Although,
Mm,
we were very much told he had to wait until the latest moment. So, we did, and because my wife was classified as high risk due to not having gone through all the processes here, we were told to come in slightly earlier. So we came in on the evening of the Thursday, and she was looked at. We sat there for ages waiting for someone, and you're sitting there thinking, this is important,
yeah.
why isn't the nurse seeing me? Where are the midwives? Why aren't we the center of attention here? And of course they knew there were many hours to go, so she was checked into the hospital, and they basically said to me, go home.
Yeah.
And like much like you, but this was before the birth. I said, go home. So I did. I slept as much as I could that night, and came in the morning wondering if there was going to be, fireworks that day, and there wasn't. So we sat there, and contractions sort of stayed static for a long time. It was at that point where they were almost telling us to go home, but it wasn't enough for us to go home. And then the fireworks started at about 5 or 6 that night, where things started to ramp up. And unfortunately, it took a long time for him to turn around, and then contractions were getting worse, and it took the whole night until he was born at 8 in the morning. So my poor wife had to go through all of this, and I think for me, just the experience of not being able to do anything at all, and it's this is like the most people talk about as the most important moments of their life, and you're sitting there going, I can't do anything. There's absolutely nothing I can do, and in fact, there comes a point where I think comforting your wife becomes more irritating to her than not. I don't know if that happened to you guys. You're like, are you okay? Can I help you? Just that, and when she's having contractions, last thing she wants is her husband to say, are you having another contraction? I don't know if that happened to you, but it was halfway through the night. She was like, of course I'm having a contraction,
Yeah. It's funny. We didn't have that moment where the wife gets angry at the husband. It never happened. Like she might need something, or she would express discomfort, or she would ask me for something, but we never had that moment, again, that movie moment of the wife like going off on the husband because of the hormones or whatever. She didn't even really have mood swings. So in that sense,
Go and get my cigarettes.
Yeah. Like she would have like some cravings, of course, some weird ones sometimes, but it was for that aspect, I mean, I don't know if it's just my wife, but I feel like there's a lot of societal, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure some women get it, but at least my wife, she was not taking it out on me.
I think I'm mischaracterizing here, because it wasn't that angry. It was just she just sort of gave me a look when I asked if she was having contractions, and I realized myself. So I think just the actual,
well, I mean, sorry, just to qualify what I just said, I think the one moment where something is like not just completely it's always understandable, but at this point it's even more, it's during the actual labor. I think at that point, like, it's nothing, and as you said, there's nothing you can do, and
push, chérie.
Yeah, just push. Yeah.
I think for me it was very strange, but the hardest part up to then was trying to make conversation with the nurses, because for us, we were assigned, it was a midwife who was in the room all the time because she was high risk. So it was basically me and my wife and a midwife, and nothing was happening. It was just the thing. And then once the contraction started and things started to move along, just the idea of being completely helpless was a problem. And then also my wife had it in her head that she didn't want forceps to be used in the delivery of my eldest, and I think she'd read horror stories about all kinds of things, and then there came a point where the doctor came in and said, right, you've got a choice here. We can either do a forceps delivery because he wasn't quite right, or we can do a
C-section.
A C-section. And she immediately jumped to the C-section, and the doctor looked at me and he was like, this isn't the right choice, but it's the choice of the woman. So what they said was, let's what we'll do is we'll that went into the surgery, into the the surgery, the room,
the surgery room,
I had to get dressed up in scrubs and all that, and I had it wasn't the same as you. They didn't leave me alone, thank God. And went in with her dressed in scrubs, and I had to sit with her, and she got the like you had got the jab in the back, and suddenly, she went from in amazing pain to just like, oh, I don't care. It was just a very, very, she got it was something block. I can't remember what it's called. And then the doctor, had a look, and he saw, and he said, okay, well, we can have a go with the forceps first. And it was very strange. It changed in that moment. She sort of said, okay, have a quick go. And you had to do a bit of cutting. I don't want to go into details. So it was within seconds of him doing that, there was suddenly this, because I was sitting at her head, and there was a screen up. There was the sound of, it was the most terrifying and most beautiful sound in the world of my, my son crying out for the first time.
Yeah.
And that is tears came to me then. It was instant. It was like
yes.
I think for me, you know,
tears.
I think for me that
it's
was
about time.
Yeah, yay for tears.
we talk about when the pregnancy became real, and it sounds silly, but that moment he became real to me.
Yeah.
It was that exact moment and I saw him being carried over, and he was covered with blood, obviously, and they sort of mopped him down, and I got up to go get him, and they pushed me down. They said, you can't move, you stay there. And they brought him over, and he had skin to skin with the wife, and exactly like you, I was then taken away while she was stitched up with the baby, while she was stitched up, and for me that was, I think for me, I wasn't as concerned about my wife at that point because it wasn't such a major operation. I think a C-section would have been something else. That is when I just suddenly thought, wow, my life has changed forever. And no less love or disrespect to my second son, who was much easier pregnancy and a much easier birth. He was born in the birthing rooms as opposed to the surgery room. The operating theatre. That's it. He came out naturally, and that was much more of a waiting game. And I knew what was going on then, so it was I knew that there was a process, and I felt comfortable where I was. So it wasn't as much of an emotional impact at his birth, even though there was still some there. I think for me, becoming a father for the first time, just hearing his voice, suddenly the world exploded for me, and I suddenly realized, oh, I'm not the center of my universe anymore.
That's funny. I didn't have that moment at all. Right. I mean, one other factor might have been that I was, I don't speak Finnish. I speak a bit of Swedish. My wife is Swedish speaking, and Finland has both languages, but the Swedish speaking is a minority. So most people speak Finnish, and I don't speak Finnish at all. Everyone also speaks English, so usually it's fine. And for most of the delivery time, it was fine. But when they decided to do the C-section, obviously it was, business time, and then they started speaking Finnish only, and so added to the fact that I didn't know what was happening, I also didn't understand anything that was being said, so that added to the confusion of the situation. But yeah, I did not have that. Maybe I did, I don't remember now. Because let's move on to the, when you go back home, after a few days, we finally managed to go back home. And let's talk about the first.
Sorry, Patrick. I just have one more thing to add. Maybe it's relevant because it's about Japanese difference.
Oh, sure.
In the last episode, it's always about Japanese difference. And I heard you talking about C-section and forceps and things. One particular things about giving birth in Japan is that the epidural shot is really unusual, and it's almost forbidden. And if you want an epidural anesthesia, you have to pay a lot of money.
Really?
It's crazy. So we chose not to get it. And she gave birth without epidural.
Wow. Well, I mean, it is a little bit discouraged here too, but...
I tried to find out why. And what I heard the most from Japanese people is that a mother is supposed to feel the pain if she really wants to give birth properly. That's so old school. So I was stunned by this statement. Yes, that's the main reason I heard. That's so crazy.
That's very interesting, because I know I don't know if that extends to C-sections, but I know that the statistics on the number of C-sections in America is much higher. I know there's a lot of
they planned them.
It's planned, whereas here, very much like Finland, it's it's not encouraged, and it's a last resort. Whereas I know with my wife has her little internet mother friends group that in America it's almost encouraged to have a C-section, from what I understand.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, C-sections make everything easier at the moment, and kind of like epidurals. The problem with epidurals is that they slow down the labor and they make things a little bit slower. And in Finland, they don't automatically give it to you. They can you have a choice, but they tell you maybe try some other things. If you want it, we'll give it to you. You don't have to pay or anything, and it's not actively discouraged. It's just they encourage you to try other things as well. The gas and the bath, and we did all of that. But the C-sections is absolutely a last resort. And I think in the US, some people say it's because, doctors get paid for that. And some people, I don't know what the reason is, but it's certainly a big problem. In Finland, they really encourage you to breastfeed, like almost to an oppressive amount, especially since in France, almost no one breastfeeds. In France, women go back to work like 3 months later, 3 months after the birth, usually. And in Finland, you get, I think, between the father and the mother, you get a year off of work. So babies don't go to daycare until they're a year old, usually. And breastfeeding is super encouraged, as I said. Most people breastfeed. If you don't breastfeed, people look at you funny, like you're some kind of pariah, or like if you really can't do it, they understand, but it's not what is expected. And if people, like, officially, they tell you have a choice. Some people choose to breastfeed, some people don't. But if you don't, it's like you will get some weird looks. And the thing with C-sections is that it's a little bit less safe for the baby, because when you go through the birth canal and come out, you get a lot of, bacteria, whatever, that prop up your immune system. Same thing with breastfeeding. The World Health Organization recognizes that breastfeeding is much better for the health of the baby because of immune system. It builds up the immune system from the mothers. So obviously it's better. But as I mentioned, in France, no one does it. So, or almost no one does it. So it was very weird for me to have this system where it was so encouraged. And so anyway, in the end, my wife really wanted to do it. But let's talk about getting back home. For us, it was a few days later. And the first week was fine. The first 10 days even, I would say. Because what I learned later is that babies don't really realize that they're out of the womb until maybe a week to 10 days after they've actually come out. Not very smart things, those infants. So the first 10 days were fine. He was having a hard time eating, so we would feed him with a little syringe, and he would eat very often, but he would eat. And my wife was trying to breastfeed. What they don't tell you, by the way, I don't curse on this show, but I really want to. It's effing difficult to breastfeed. It's super hard and stressful. Like, the latch has to be good, and the milk has to start coming, and the baby is hungry. So the hungrier he gets, the less interested he is in trying to latch on properly.
Yeah,
it's like
there's many parameters to get right.
Yeah, it's not like I thought it was like, just, put him on there and he's going to start sucking. No. That's not how it works. It is like a heroic effort to breastfeed. And so the other thing is, after that blissful week when the baby doesn't really realize he's out of the womb, again, I don't swear, but holy poop, having babies is not fun. Jesus. And this is essentially everything until now was, an hour and 15 minutes introduction to me being able to say this. It is...
Okay, go on.
Fuck it, I'm going to swear. It's fucking horrible. having babies is a really, really bad idea. Don't do it, people. It will ruin your life. And we were not prepared. Like, people don't say it. People
You
do
won't
not
sleep
say
anymore.
it's not even just about sleep. I mean, it depends on babies. I know that some babies sleep super well, some babies cry normally, some babies don't cry. Our baby was not happy, and he was crying all the time. There was nothing that would get him to sleep. Like, people who follow me on Twitter remember this from a few months ago. He didn't like the stroller. He didn't like the pacifier. He didn't like being carried around in the carrier. He didn't like anything. And our one saving grace is the fact that he would sleep at night. Like, he would sleep pretty reasonably. Of course, in the beginning, he would wake up two or three times at night. But we would have a relatively okay time during the night. But he would never fall asleep without crying for at least 20 minutes. At least.
20 minutes.
Often more. And not just once. Like, every time for 3 months, every time he would fall asleep, he would cry. And we went to every doctor. You know, we were worried. We were like, what is happening? And we tried everything. He would cry. And every doctor would tell us, you know, hey, your baby's in super good health. Congrats. And we're like, okay, great. And we saw every type of doctor you can think of. Thankfully, I mean, obviously this is not a serious issue because he was very healthy, and thank God for that. But save for a serious health concern, it was because what people don't realize is that babies crying is not just annoying. It's endearing for the first 2 minutes. It's funny for the next 5. And after 10 minutes, you start being really annoyed. But baby cries are genetically designed to be torture to adults and especially to parents.
To make ears bleed.
Yes, you have to physically want to make it stop. That's how it works. And if you can't make it stop, it is constant torture every few hours. In the beginning, they, fall asleep like 9 times a day. So if the baby is going to be crying 9 times a day for 20 minutes or half an hour, it's funny. My wife was talking to one of her friends who already had a baby, who had a baby 6 months before, and she would say, it's really hard, and the baby keeps crying, and we don't know what to do. And when you're in those moments, you get like weird thoughts. Like, I was thinking we shouldn't have had a baby, not consciously, but you're like, what did we do? And so my wife was talking to her friends, and she was like, yeah, have you ever thought it was too hard? And she was like, oh yeah, I called a friend at one point saying I was thinking about how adoption works. And her friend told her, well, have you actually looked it up on the net yet? No? Okay, so you're good. You're not at the stage where you should be maybe thinking about what you're doing yet. Like, different babies, every baby is different. Oh my God. It was like, I'm still not over it, as you can hear. And I'm going to, include in this the last 3 to 4 months, which are, the month 3 to month 8, which we're in now. And I will say, he is now as good as he was bad before. Like, he's become incredibly easy to manage, super nice. He eats well, he sleeps. He still cries sometimes, but he's a baby, so that's what they do. But super cute. He sleeps well. He does his nights very well. We're very fortunate at this point. But man, during those first 3 months, I was ready to jump out the freaking window, and no one tells you it's that bad. Or maybe they do and you don't realize. I don't know. But no one tells you it's that bad. It is the best way I can describe it is torture. Literally, it's torture. And it's torture that you can't do anything about because you have a baby and you're responsible for it. And you can't, decide to change jobs or move countries or dump your abusive girlfriend or whatever. You have a baby and he's your responsibility. And you can't make it stop crying. Like when I was telling people that he wouldn't, he didn't like the stroller, they were like, oh, all right, well, I guess you're effed. and we're like, well, yeah, I guess we are. So yeah, the first 3 months, that is essentially therapy for me to express it like this.
Wow, you
horrible.
expressed this a lot on Twitter.
Yeah, so it was my outlet.
on many funny tweets. Sorry, but the reality seems even worse.
It was
poor Patrick.
Terrible. How was it for you, Martin?
Oh, yes. So that's a good occasion to say another thing about Japanese difference.
Okay.
So after we leave the maternity, the Japanese tradition is, and I think you will be surprised, that the mother, we don't go back home together. Actually, we did, but just for one day. After that, it's usual for mothers to go to their parents' house with the baby and stay 1 month.
Really?
And without the father. Did you
wow.
hear me? Without the father.
Like, I don't know if I'm envious, or actually I think I'm a bit envious.
Yes, that I think it saved me some sleep hours.
Yeah. And I understand this because one thing that we didn't realize enough was you need help. Like our big problem, the main problem was that he didn't stop crying. That was the main issue. But you really need help. When we say it takes a village, I think it's the first 3 months that take a village. But sorry, keep going.
Yes, that's exactly the point. To get help from some experienced people like your own parents. So that's why. But I don't think nowadays a lot of girls go back for whole months because it's too hard, and you can get pissed by your mother, who gives you maybe too many advices, maybe too old school advices. So that was not really the case for my wife. It was okay, but I think we couldn't wait, and we broke the rule. Actually, we broke the rule, and I went to visit quite a few times because it was really, try to imagine, it's how is it crazy you get a baby but you cannot see him or her for a full month. That's
and
crazy.
You're not supposed to visit?
Yes, that's how crazy it is. Yes, you're not supposed to visit, but of course my parents-in-law are pretty nice, and they were okay, you can pass by. And so I spent a few nights, and it was, at the end, it was like I was living there.
Okay.
So but yes, it was the beginning, the very beginning. And maybe we were luckier than you, because she was pretty nice and she could sleep well. And of course she cried a lot sometimes. And but I think after 3 months she could get real nights, and we could sleep quite well. So
that's I'm happy for you. I think I don't wish anyone, I don't get angry about people saying our baby was easy. I'm happy for them. I think maybe I did get angry a few months ago, but I think the thing that does get me angry is people who say, oh, but you forget how bad it is, and then you after a few months you won't remember because they're so cute. I mean, honestly, again, people following me on Twitter and Instagram and whatever know that he is impossibly cute, and now he's amazing, and he's starting to crawl, and he's super cool. Like, I build towers of toys on one end of the room, and he's like, ha, 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 and he goes to the tower to make it fall down. It's great. But like the people who say, "Ah, you forget." I do not forget. Like, I will never forget those few months. And the people who say you forget are the people who got like easier non-colicky babies, and who don't understand what that really does to you, because having a baby cry for 5 or 10 minutes like a couple of times a day, or even 5 times a day, is not the same experience at all. And they got like a different brand of baby. I don't know where they got theirs, but it's not the same thing. And when you live through this, it's funny because on Twitter some people say, "Oh, you forget because they're so cute," and I'm like, I do not forget. And some people respond, "Yeah, no, when you get a really bad infant, like if the situation is really bad, you don't forget. Just let them talk. They don't know what they're talking about, you know."
And when you complained, did someone say, "Oh, but you are just doing it the wrong way"?
No, I don't think so.
No?
No, I don't think so. People didn't. I mean, people had some recommendations, which I was thankful for because we tried a lot of things. But it was, no one actually said, "Oh, you're not doing it right."
Okay.
I think
Cool.
we also had the help, again, of the Neovala system, which, you have like the first day visit, and then the first week, and then 2 weeks, and after that it spreads to every month or every 2 months, and that was super helpful as well because we could ask questions, but they didn't necessarily have the answers. It's like, if the baby is crying and it's healthy, as I was saying, their job is to make sure babies don't die. So if it's healthy, if it's crying, they're like, I don't know. Babies cry. What are you going to do? And so it was still good to be able to go there to make sure that he was not suffering from any weird illness. But at the same time, it was a bit frustrating. And they also check on the parents as well. Like, they had questions for us.
Same in Japan.
Yeah, they do.
A girl came twice to check on her and us.
Yeah.
to check if we are good parents or some kind of brutal and silly parents.
I think they have to make sure
which we are not.
I think they have to make sure you're holding up as well, like you're not collapsing. And for us, I think there were a couple of times when they might have written a couple of concerned notes in the little book. I don't think so, but I mean, we were not in good shape after a month of this treatment.
You were about to collapse.
But we couldn't, that's the thing. We had very little help from, because we didn't know to ask, and the thing is, when the baby is crying so much, you don't want to leave it with someone else. And it feels like you are responsible for it. So you want to make sure, like, you can't relax, you can't go out, you can't. So anyway, and I work from home also. That's, I guess, important to mention. So as a father, I am, I think, more involved than most fathers in the sense that I'm there all the time. My wife works from home as well, so the baby hasn't gone to daycare yet. And we are both with him all the time, and we try not to be overbearing. But like, we are, every time he cries, both of us get our alarms raised up, even when, her brother is here to help or the mother is here to help. When he starts crying, we're like, "Oh, is he okay?" And we go check on him. So now, as I said, he's super cute and easy. He's always been cute. He was impossibly cute even when he was crying all the time. But now he's easy, so it's better. But even then, I mean, even more than, we had no moment of rest. So keeping the podcasts going and keeping work from home was really challenging. Thankfully, I mean, it worked out, but that was not easy. And as a father, I think working from home is both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because you see every little thing. And I would say I'm 40, 60, maybe even 45, 65, 55 involved. Like, we take care of him really almost equally, maybe even 50-50. I don't know. Maybe she would have a different opinion. But at the same time, you don't get breaks at all, ever. So now it's been 8 months. And as a French person for whom babies go to daycare or with a nanny after maybe sometimes, sometimes as early as a month. It's rare, but
yeah,
definitely
a month,
3 months.
2 months. I'm always surprised by that. Yeah.
Even 3 months, if your baby isn't going to daycare, you're a weirdo. And it's funny because initially when my wife learned that French people get only 3 months of maternal leave, she was like, "Oh, this is barbaric, and you should be there for the baby, and this is preventing women from it's in Finland we have a right for women to get maternal leave, and this is an advantage and an advance for women's rights, blah blah blah." And now I don't think she would want necessarily it to be just 3 months, but the fact that it's just 3 months means that you have the system around it to take care of the babies, and the mother isn't kind of a slave to taking care of the baby. If you want to go back to work after 3 months, you can. And if you want someone to take care of your baby, you can. She's saying she wouldn't have wanted that anyway, but given how hard it was, I think she would have liked to have the option. And I understand that. I mean, I have a very different look on that, the 3 months maternal leave, because in Finland, mothers are expected to stay at home, breastfeed, and take care of the baby for at the very least 6 months, usually 9 months, and then the father takes over for 3 months. So you can split it up differently. But yeah, so it was an interesting experience. How did it go for you, Bruce?
I think for you it was you got
shafted. I agree.
Shafted a bit. I had first boy was he had his moments, and by moments I mean weeks where he would cry and wouldn't stop, but then he would stop and we'd have some respite from it. So I think that makes a difference, and I fully understand when your child cries and you can't stop it and you've tried everything, there is something in there that clicks in your head, and you just it's meant to make you want to do something, and to not be able to do it must be the most frustrating thing in the world. And I do remember it. It's funny, I almost don't remember it until somebody brings it up. I don't want to be, I'm not saying that you forget about it, but years later you look back and you think, thank God that's over.
And we almost laugh about it now, almost.
It's interesting, and you before we started the podcast, you were asking me why I had two, and that we decided to have our second soon after, because we thought, well, if this is what it's like, let's get it over with. For number two, because we always wanted to have two kids, and I wanted to have a boy and a girl, etc., but we had two boys, and I wouldn't change that for the world. But we thought, well, let's get it over with. And actually our second was worse. He latched onto his mum, and he had to be breastfed for the first year of his life, whereas the eldest lasted 6 weeks, and then we had to I was able to feed him. We had to go to formula, because he just, like you said, breastfeeding is not it's not baby has a natural, or mum has a natural ability to do it. It's hard work. So we had the two different experiences there, and
I have to mention we mixed it differently at different periods, but I also gave him the bottle often, so I also have that experience. So.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to be able to help then, and to be able to help mum. But I think we won't go past the first few months, because I don't want to give you too many spoilers. But there does come a time when you sort of think, this little baby is becoming a person, and you do kind of, you do look back on it and think, wow, I actually went through that. And you sort of realize, you look at your parents and you think, I understand why you wanted me to work out. I don't know what your parents was like. I know you look back and you think, okay, I know why you feel like I owe you.
Oh, I mean, the concept of, first of all, I look at my mom now very differently than I did a year ago. Sadly, my dad passed away before my son was born, but a couple of years ago. But already, like when you're a child, you are incredibly selfish, obviously. And when you're in your teens and 20s, you're so ungrateful and like you're this little know-it-all.
Exactly.
And I think it changes when you get maybe in your 30s, late 30s. And I'm 45 now in a few days. So I already came around that attitude, and I already had a lot more, I think, proper respect for my parents and more love than I did, even though I always loved them, of course, but genuine care and love for years now, obviously. But it is so clear that all of that ungratefulness and shitty attitude is, you know, your parents don't necessarily say too much about it because they know that this is something you pay forward and that they're going to get their share of it. Your children are going to get their share of it once they get their own children. And oh my God, do I know it now? Like I completely understand my son is going to be ungrateful and like hopefully he will be raised well enough that he's not going to be too bad. But I know he's going to be a little as bad as I was. And it makes me think, yeah, my mom knew what was going to happen to me when I have kids, and she was like, "Oh, you know, it's normal. Children are like this."
And so will be his own children.
Yeah, exactly.
Cetera,
No, that's what I think. When he
Cycle of
turns
life.
on, when he becomes like this, I'll be like, "Yeah, you'll see. You'll see.
You will
when
see."
have your own."
Being a father is just, it's the best. I remember asking a colleague of mine 10 years ago, I said, do you think you're happier now than before you had a baby? And he took a full minute to think about it, and he answered, he said, it's about the same. He says there's some parts of it where you are much happier, and there's some parts of it where you look back and you think, I remember that. And it's so difficult. You lose a part of yourself, but it's a wonderful part of yourself that you gain back.
You gain so much.
And I wouldn't change it for the world, but
Who says nothing that comes before a but in a sentence doesn't count?
You both understand what that but is. It's kind of like a thing. And I think in the modern day, fathers need to be recognized more. And I think we kind of, you tweeted about this a few weeks ago, Patrick. There's this thing where if fathers aren't recognized as caregivers and people who care for their children more, it's not going to allow women the space to become, it's a feminist issue for fathers to be recognized. Because for them to be recognized, me off
so much. Sorry, finish.
This is the thing. There's these things. I follow some of these things on Facebook and that where they talk about, the bumbling man who can't do this and that, and you sort of think, I'm going to swear now. Fuck off, just piss off. And there are fathers out there who will take their sons out or their daughters out for a walk, who will, comb their hair, read them stories, all these things that are traditionally women. There are men who are, I've got a good friend he's a stay-at-home dad and his wife goes out and works. And, these are the roles that need to be. And, I think for us, we all seem to be fathers who are experienced and are into being a father, and that's why, in a way, your frustration and your anger, Patrick, is a badge you should wear with honor, because you were there. You didn't sort of say, "Oh, right, I'm going to go down to the pub tonight," which I think
you didn't give up.
Traditionally, that's what would have happened in the past, and your wife had to deal with it. So I think it's an important thing that meant that it's recognized that being a father is important now and is a real thing.
I agree. It really pisses me off when, I take care of sometimes when we're in Paris, especially, my wife goes so she works from home, but her office is in Paris. And so when we're there, she goes to work at the office. So I take care of the baby a few times a week and for the whole day. And, sometimes I mention something on Twitter, and sometimes you have people or in a store or something, they will say, "Oh, daddy is babysitting today." And as you said, fuck off. I'm not babysitting. I'm being a parent. Like, what the hell are you thinking? It's
I'm his dad. Yeah.
Yeah, and it angers me so much, and I think I don't think it's always the case, but I think in this case it's really a generational thing. I have had, anytime I've talked about this, I've had nothing but reactions of people saying, yeah, it is annoying. It's not babysitting. You are actually taking care of your child. So I think most people now don't look at it like that, and it's a change that maybe has happened in the past, I don't know, 20 years or something like that. One thing that annoys me, though, is that France is very ill-equipped to take care of babies. Like, the subway is impossible to navigate. You don't always have elevators. You don't have changing tables in bathrooms, in cafes and restaurants and stuff like that. And it's like, it's weird because babies are everywhere in France. Like the country has a very high natality rate, and babies are very much taken care of and enjoyed. And like, it's not like we don't like people who have babies around in the city. It's not like you hide into in your apartment and don't take the baby out until he can, pee standing up or sitting down if it's a girl. But still, it's not equipped for anything. And if you don't have this one type of stroller called the Baby Zen Yo-Yo, which is a lifesaver, by the way, you can take it actually in the plane. It goes in the overhead compartment. It's only existed for 3 years, but it's funny. Wow. Every Parisian person that has a baby has it. Like, there's two types, and one on the right side of the river and one on the like Rive Gauche and Rive Droite have different types. It's very funny Parisian humor, but it's like a lifesaver because it's very nimble, and you can fold it into like, you can fold the top to go under the passage in the subway. And
wow, I wish I had this one when I was in Paris.
Yeah, it's very, very helpful. But like the city, like when you're in Helsinki, everything is easy. Like, every restaurant has a changing table, and not just in the women's bathroom. Like, it's super easy. And in Paris, it's terrible.
Same in Tokyo. Even in the men's bathroom, there's a child seat to put the child while you're doing what you need to do, and some changing tables, even in the men's bathroom. So
that's funny because Tokyo is
the birth rate.
Japan is considered like not very, men go to work. They don't take care of babies in my...
Yes, but such things are now changing, apparently. So yes, the birth rate is quite low compared to France, but on the other hand, you have a lot of equipments for taking care. For every single station in Japan, maybe not every one of them, but there are thousands. You have elevators and escalators, yes.
You mean train station, yeah.
Train station, yes.
It's funny, you told me when we met a few years ago that there's now this tendency of like the ikemen papa, that are like the cool dads who take care of the baby. In Finland, there's the latte papa, which are the men who grab their latte and go in the park with their baby and meet with the other men that have babies that they take care of. So there's definitely a tendency like this. In France, I haven't seen anything like this. It doesn't mean that men don't take care of the babies, but there isn't like this cultural image that has developed. Maybe it's because, I don't know. How is it in Scotland?
I think in Scotland we're still a little behind. There, some of the newer places have baby changing areas in separate, but as far as dads who have coffee, there's nothing like that I can see. But I do live in rural Scotland, so there's not really that much around compared to other areas. So I was just thinking while you were talking what having a child in London would be like now, and I get the impression from friends of mine who've had a child recently that it's still very much wives who go to take them to the play areas, etc., etc. I don't know. I could be wrong though. So I think we're still behind France, and I was quite surprised to hear Japan there. So yeah, but getting more and more progressive as time goes on, which is good.
I will say, as a conclusion, so having a baby is really hard. For the past 3 months, in the past 2 months, he's becoming more responsive. I think the really difficult part is that for the first three months and even a little bit longer, he's really just an eating and pooping machine. So you don't get any feedback of anything positive out of the baby, however cute he is. Like the cuteness is their evolutionary trait that made the human race survive. Because if they weren't cute, you would not worry about them as much as you do. And, they're so annoying. Like, I even had people say that there is a theory, apparently a real theory, of like difficulty of baby raising being a evolutionary advantage, because I was genuinely surprised. Like, why are babies so difficult to raise when animals have, when they are born, they get up and walk immediately, and our babies are like completely incapable of doing anything. It's really the fourth trimester is actually a fourth trimester. And someone said it might be an evolutionary advantage because the parents have to be intelligent. Like the species has to be capable of taking care of that helpless little tiny blob and in order for the species to survive. So I thought that was interesting. But in the past few months, he's become incredibly fun and responsive and all of that. And going out with him in Paris, especially, which is a very densely populated area, obviously, is a really interesting experience. And I think my wife gets the same one, but I definitely get, like, either when he is in the stroller and in the carrier, he's like a social interaction magnet. Everyone, and it might be because he is uncharacteristically the cutest baby in the world, which he actually is. I'm not just saying this.
Course.
I mean,
of course, yeah.
I know every parent says that,
After
but
9.
in my case, it's actually true. But I mean, everyone comes around and is like, "Oh, little baby, he's so cute." Like, it's funny how comfortable people are interacting with people who have babies, or maybe with the baby directly, and it's kind of heartwarming. It kind of makes me happier, I guess. Like, when I go out with a baby, maybe he's been a little bit fussy, crying in the house, and we have to go out for him to be distracted, because you don't give them snacks to be distracted. That's 4 times a day. And we could talk about the way French people view education. I didn't even mention this at all. But the views on education, wow, are they different from the views on education in Finland. It's like, in France, you have a framework in which you get what the baby can do and what the baby can't do. You set the parameters, and inside that framework, they're pretty free, but they don't go out of the limits. And, if the time to eat, for example, is this and this and that time, obviously when they're, biologically able to hold enough food to not eat for a certain amount of hours, then they don't eat. And if they are crying, I mean, obviously, if it's the complete meltdown, you might give them some milk or something to exceptionally. But if they're fussy, you do something else to distract them until it's time to eat. You don't use food as a calming agent for a fussy baby. And there are some things like that for which the French are super strict. For example, on letting babies cry. Of course, it's controversial everywhere, but in France, it's much more accepted than in Finland. Like, in Finland, if you let your baby cry, they're going to look at you like you're a criminal. And in our case, we had to do it after a few months because literally the baby was not learning to sleep. He couldn't sleep, and we had to force him to learn to sleep, which is the whole argument about letting babies cry. But nowadays, we're so thankful that we ended up doing it because he has learned by himself to sleep. Bottom line, not to do the argument about letting babies cry, but in France, it is much more accepted to set the parameters for the kid. Like the kid is not the one who makes the decisions, not because it's good to be strict or whatever. It's because the baby can't handle the stress of having to decide. Like for a few months, we would do baby-led stuff and kind of ask him if he was hungry or ask him if he was asleep, and he was not happy. Like, and he became happy when we sort of set a framework for him, which is a much more French way of approaching things. So that was a really interesting thing. But I don't know. I've gone off on 15 different tangents there. But anything to say about that framework thing, or how people approach the not really discipline, but not education even. They're too small for that. But how you set things for the baby.
I think for us here in Scotland, it's been a very much we're given guidelines for what is expected, and we would have a midwife come over, especially early on, and say, this is where we are, and we're given a little red book of where weight should be and all that, and I think we're more along the French lines, although there are discussions and different midwives who would say things about, there's a whole crying it out. Should they cry it out? Should they not? Should, skin to skin time, where the baby should sleep, etc., etc. There's big no-nos, like don't let the baby sleep on the bed. Although, there were times when we were so tired with our first baby that sometimes he fell asleep on the bed with us, and we would wake up. I remember being hyper conscious of him even when I was asleep. So, there were things that we were supposed to do and not supposed to do. Whether we followed them or not was a different thing. And I would say that was shame if I was speaking to some of the midwives that we spoke to, but some were quite realistic and said, well, sometimes you've just got to do what's best for you. And I think that's generally where we are. We're somewhere in the middle of, yes, there are guidelines, but don't push them too hard. Like breastfeeding, there was a time where it was very much pushed that yes, breast is best, etc. But the push now is very much what fed is best. Just make sure the baby's got food if he's hungry. And
I like the breast is best.
Yes, well,
it's a nice catchphrase.
That you can use that in a different sense, and maybe a teenager. But there was, I think we're very much in the middle now of that. It's interesting to have France with very strict, well, not strict, but just have those very firm guidelines.
I think one of the revelations from when we were pregnant was the book. What's the name? Bringing Up Bébé. I think I've mentioned it here and there a couple of times, but it's a really wonderful book, very well written, about a woman going to France, an American woman going to live in France for a few years and being confronted with the way children are brought up in France as opposed to in the US. And first of all, it's super well written. So I would recommend you reading it, even because it's fun, it's funny. But the contrast is really stark in that. So her child was, I think, a year old when they let the baby cry it out, and it was hard. Like it lasted for, can't remember, like an hour the first night, 15 minutes the second, and then she would sleep. And she had been crying in bed for a year before that, and they would go comfort her, and of course you go comfort them. But I mean, read the book; it's very well explained, and the contrast is very stark. Like even with food, the way we approach food in France, and this is super cultural, and people are going to laugh and it's like, oh yeah, of course it's France, ha ha ha. No, it is important. Like the way you learn, you teach your kid how to eat is like, there's this horrible stereotype that that children in America, people think, oh, they only eat white food like chicken and pasta and whatever, those easy types of food. Well, if you don't teach them to like other things, then they're not going to, and that's going to make your life difficult. And I think in France, it's almost like I love video games, so I think about this in these terms. In order to make a great to sell a lot of games, the best thing to do is to make a great game, right? If you make a great game, then you're going to sell a lot of games and you are going to become rich. So the best way to become rich is to serve your customers really well. Well, apply this to babies. I think it's what we do in France. The best way to have an easy life as a parent is to have a baby that is well adjusted in many different ways, including the fact that they eat many different things. So
I agree.
Yes, he's French and he agrees. How do you do that in Japan?
100%. Yes, we try to give her both cultures. So it's always funny because yes, there's the French part, the Japanese part. So it also comes with the language. Maybe we will speak about language afterward. So, but yeah, for food, we took it really seriously, and we really try to get her some rice because it's the base of everything in Japan. But, pretty soon we gave her some bread, and she enjoyed eating some very very soft bread. So, and she still likes it now. She likes pâté and saucisson.
Yeah,
so it worked.
We give him when we started solids, it was immediately like some fish, some chicken. Not immediately. That the meat came afterwards, but there's like broccoli and spinach and obviously carrots and that kind of thing. But lots of different types of food and home cooked as well. My wife is really good with this. We have a very French thing, which I'm sure Martin, called the baby cook.
Mm-hmm. The legendary baby cook.
Yes.
So we didn't have the chance to have one, but I heard it's kind of magic.
It's very clever. It's really simple. It's just a machine where you can steam cook any kind of food, and then the mixer is integrated. So you steam cook it, mix it, and it makes puree. And it's funny because in France, when you talk about it, everyone knows it. Like literally everyone is like, yeah, baby cook, of course. And outside of France, people are like, what? What are you talking about? What is this? Everyone buys like...
You want to cook babies?
But I mean, obviously in France, like, and we're creating some kind of little food snob. I was going to say a bad word, but like we went to France after he started eating solids, and we bought some little, prepared food for babies in the store, and he wouldn't eat them. Little he was like, I'm not eating that crap. What are you? Where is my home cooked meal? You large human, I require better food than this.
Are you trying to trick me?
Yeah, no, he was not like he would put it in his mouth and go like, really? And we ended up finding some that he would eat quite enthusiastically, so it was okay. But it was really funny, and it's just like I don't want to harp on this, but it's just one example of. I'm French, and just like my baby is the cutest, I would say the French really have a good handle on how to raise. To educate babies and to bring up babies. I really think it's the case. Like I look at babies in many different countries in the world, and in France, babies don't throw tantrums. They might get fussy, they might get angry sometimes, but they don't throw tantrums. Like the tantrum in the US is the common life of every parent. Like every once in a while, your baby is going to throw himself on the floor and cry and stomp their feet and whatever. Seeing my French friends' babies gave me hope for the future, because I thought my life wasn't necessarily going to be that stereotypical life is over as a father image that you have from the US mostly, because the cultural influence in the US is very strong. But in Finland as well, like, I hope they don't listen to this, but I've had before our baby was born, a couple of years before actually, we had a few friends of Sonia's who came with their babies to the house, and I was like, they were a little bit older, and I was like, what is this? What are you doing? How are you letting? And there's this image of children, they don't learn anything before they're like 6 years old, so it's no use teaching them anything. So it feels like Finnish children aren't really brought up. They're just living alongside the parents, and they're not taught anything until they're 6. It's anyway.
Really?
French babies. Read Bringing Up Bébé. It's a great book. So yeah, it's already been 2 hours.
Is the title
guys.
Bring It Up, Baby?
Bringing Up Bébé.
Bringing Up, Baby.
Yeah.
I do want to add, though, when it comes to food, and I've got the luxury of having 2 kids, is that it's so dependent on the child. We've got one who's such a picky eater, and we think it's because he had illnesses when he was young, and the other one who will eat anything. He will literally eat anything you put in front of him and try it. Whereas the eldest is he is turning into, unfortunately, and we're making him taste everything, but it's very much beige foods. It's the stuff without sauce and all that. So I think and we've treated them exactly the same. So there is one thing you've got to remember is that for
every
me,
baby is different.
They are individual human beings, and that's a hard thing to do. And I think it's a lot of times when people tell you this is what your baby needs, or no, actually my baby's a human being, and he or she has got their own preferences that they just can't express at the moment. Oh, hello. Is that a little Beja?
No, it might be at Martin's place.
No, it was mine. Actually, while we were speaking, I was being a bad dad because it's pretty late here. It's 10:30, and Manon is still not sleeping.
Oh my god!
And
oh wow!
I actually, while I was in my office, I mean in my room, I saw some papers being put under the door, and there was written "Papa." Not yet in Japanese, because she cannot write in French yet. She can write Japanese. So
not yet.
The mic, and
she wants to go to sleep.
Come in the room. Yes, and because my wife is not back home yet, so I had to take care of her. But I thought the recording would be shorter.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So no, it's okay. No, it's part of the deal. It's part of the world. So, and I when the mic was mute, I sent her to take a shower by herself. It's a big step up
So what you're saying is, I'm really helping your kid grow up and be better.
Exactly. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Phileas Club. So she went. She brushed her teeth by herself. I don't know, Bruce, if you are there yet for your boys, but it's really helpful. Wow.
Well,
it's a time saver.
Yeah, I'm. Oh, sorry, Bruce.
Yeah, I was getting to that point with bedtime and that. So don't want to spoil it for Patrick.
Yeah. So all right, we're gonna take this to the conclusion. I will say, obviously, everything I've been saying it might blow up in my face in a few months when our baby becomes terrible, or I don't know. I'm sure there are going to be some ups and downs, and every baby is different. But again, I would really encourage you to read Bringing Up Bébé. It is super interesting. It really is. So, and I think there are differences.
Yeah, and about the spoiler that we talked about the years to come, really the best is to come. Really, when I think Bruce will agree, the crazy moment is when you realize you're able to communicate, when he or she answers your question that he or she understood, right? It's kind of magic. It's really crazy, and then it's the beginning of a huge thing. And I think never-ending discussions,
which sometimes you might want to end, but you can't.
Exactly.
I think we're getting to the very, very beginning of the precursor to that. There are things sometimes he reacts a little bit. He's also, like as I mentioned, he crawls around and he comes to us. when we're in a different part of the room or in another room, he tries to come to us, and that has a special quality to it. And I think, there are a few people who say the mother has 9 months to get used to the idea of becoming a mother, but the dad, in reality, it only starts when the baby is born. So you have like the first 6 to 9 months, you're not really, and of course the baby isn't really reacting. It's not responsive to anything yet in the beginning. And so it starts for the dad when the baby is born. So it takes a few months for the dad to get to the place where the mom is when the baby is born. And I think it's, overall, I think it's probably accurate. And I'm getting to a point now where that interaction with the baby is making it, I would say for the last 1 or 2 months, it's become a much closer relationship where he's not just a little thing that I have to take care of out of like human duty almost, or I don't know, familial paternal duty, but it's something that is more deeper and more emotion based than that, because he is becoming a small human. And
I would definitely agree with that, Patrick. I think for me, being a father really only, what you've said there is exactly right. The first year is probably, for want of a better word, the most boring as a father. You're sort of the interaction is not as much, and I want to go back to something you said earlier where you said that and this is probably the last I'll say on it is you said that you hate it when people say, oh, you'll forget about it. And I don't think you'll forget the bad times, but what'll happen is what's coming. Yes, there'll be things that'll happen that aren't so great, but what's coming when you start interacting and having those conversations like Martin has said, and you start seeing them doing things for themselves and seeing them, expressing their love for you and being able to be their own people, is the joy is just will far outweigh anything. The pain, I think, and I could say the pain that you've had in the first few months, and now I think you're still very close to it, but you'll look back and think, wow, okay, that was hard, but my God, it was worth it. And you may be not feeling that at the moment. So that's what I'll say. There's a lot to look forward to, and I think it only gets better for fathers. The first few months are the worst, and that was for me. Even with my second son, the first year was so difficult, but it's become so amazing now to see who they are and becoming their own people. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, there are even the smallest things. Like we have this Munchkin cup, where it's basically a glass with a suction portion at the top where he can suck it, and there are some handles so he can grab it and suck it. It's like a mix between a bottle with a nipple and a cup. And when he started taking it in his own hands and bringing it to his mouth, I was like, oh wow, he's doing something by himself. Like I was genuinely,
it works.
Yeah. The baby, it works. It's amazing. And
it works.
And now only recently, he's over the past couple of weeks, maybe he started, when we read a book in the evening before he goes to bed, he started being a little bit more interested in looking at the pages than just eating the book, which was his main point of interest.
Manon
before.
ate a lot of books, yes.
Oh yeah, he eats many. Like he's an eater.
It was her main alimentation.
Yeah. So yeah, I can start seeing what you're talking about and what really everyone is talking about. But I started seeing it in the past, I would say, month or two. I think, but my wife is almost like me. I think she's not as, and I think ultimately both of us aren't like born parents. And that is very different. There are people who, the baby arrives and they're like, they are, I don't know, like focused on the baby or happy about the baby, or like they are, it's encoded in their DNA to be parents. I think for us, we very much had to learn how to be parents, with the added issue of the baby being very difficult in the first 3 months. So we didn't have in French, we say the fiber for it. We didn't have it built in. And now it's starting to come in. And for her, it's been a few more months since she was like, really like attached to the baby, but at the beginning she didn't like it. Like breastfeeding was terrible, and the baby was crying, and like even for her, I mean, it wasn't a dad or mom thing; it was for both of us. But for her, it started becoming easier. Before it started becoming easier for me. And it's still not easy. It's very much what you were talking about, Bruce. Like, you lose some things, but you gain other things. And we're still in that period, I think, where the things we've gained are minimal. It's mostly poopy diapers and crying at night. But it's getting there. And so it's starting to affect me more and more. And I sense it every week. It's a little bit more. Every week I'm a little bit more, it really is. I'm a little bit more attached to him. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes over the next few months. But anything you guys want to say before we close the show off? Martin, maybe? Or Bruce, either one?
Oh, no. I think we get quite a big review of the thing, of the first few months, but there's so many things to say about the years to come that maybe you might make another episode
it's possible.
Like 2-3 years.
We might make this a regular thing. All right, yeah. Bruce, anything to close it off?
No, I think just like I said, there's so many good things to come, and you're at where you are now. I remember remember being there as a father, and I kind of envy you in one way, and I kind of don't in another, because when for me it's been a series of being a parent is a series of letting go. You know, that child is so attached to you, and then it's great and it's scary and it's wonderful. So anyway, thanks for having me today, Patrick. It's been
thanks.
Thanks to both of you.
It was pretty long.
Yeah, a lot longer than I thought it would, but we do it for the children. So thank you so much for sticking with us. And I'll definitely look forward to what's coming in the next few months. We might do this again in a couple of years. Before we leave,
keep us posted.
Do you guys have anything you want to talk about where people can find you? I know, Martin, you have a little bit of an online activity. Do you want to let us know?
Yes, exactly. In Tokyo, I'm actually an illustrator, and I'm working on a few projects, especially now a comic book project for both Japanese and French publishing companies. So you can find me on Twitter on Baron Malutin. I won't spell it, so you can find it on the
it will be in the show notes. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Thank you, Martin. And Bruce, what about yourself?
You can find me on Twitter, Bruce Woodward 3, and I'm going to be tweeting a bit more about living life with depression and anxiety and being more open about it. So if you've got any, and especially being a parent in a society with that. So it's that's a different topic in itself, but that's something that I'll be more and more interested in as life goes on.
Excellent. Well, maybe we will have a discussion about this sometime on the show if you want to be more open about it.
I wouldn't mind. It's something that we can maybe talk afterwards about it.
We'll talk about it. We will.
Yeah.
Anything that can help. Excellent. Thank you very much to both of you. For me, it's not Patrick.
Thank you.
On Twitter and Facebook and Instagram if you want to see pictures of the aforementioned cutest baby in the world. You can also find this show at frenchspin.com. If you want to comment on this episode, tell us what your experience was as a parent, maybe some things that resonated with you, some things that didn't, some things that you thought I said were incredibly dumb and patronizing. Please let me know in the comments. And of course, the show is supported by Patreon at patreon.com patreon.com/the Phileas Club. The link is also in the show notes. Thank you so much to all of the people that do support the show. It wouldn't exist without the patrons, and I am eternally grateful. If you enjoy the show, if you think it's entertaining or interesting, if it brings anything to your life, please do consider contributing to its Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/the Phileas Club, and the link is in the show notes, so I would be incredibly thankful if you considered donating to the show. Thanks so much again. We'll be back very soon for a regular show. Talk to you then. Bye.